Hello and welcome to the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. This is my first part two. This is the first time that I've had someone dedicated on the podcast twice in my 65 episodes or something. And I have Daryl Davis back. I feel like we didn't get to some things that I wanted to talk about and about the rest of your story. So thank you, sir, for coming back on here.
My pleasure, Will. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Likewise.
So I want to, I guess the first thing that I want to talk about is I am giving pushback, and I talked about this a little bit last time, but I'm giving pushback to what is now a very common phrase in education, my world, and then other things, is being anti-racist. And Ibram Kendi, the author, has the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, and there's a lot of like corporate seminars and stuff about how to be anti-racist. And in that book, and I read Ibram Kendi's book, it was the idea that human beings or Americans are either racist or anti-racist, that everyone is essentially racist unless they're actively fighting against it. And we touched on this a little bit, but Robin DiAngelo also wrote a book called White Fragility, where she says that everybody who's white is racist because they're taking part in a racist structure. And what you need to do is you need to do all of this work to recognize your inherent racism. And I feel like you are the ultimate anti-racist. You went into the belly of the beast and you confronted racism. And I guess I'm going to say real racism, like real racism. I do not like you because of the color of your skin. And I guess I see that as different than, you know, I am taking part in the American system, which is inherently racist or something like that. But Ibram X. Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, part of the critical race theory structure is not engaging in any kind of debate or discussion with people that you deem to be wrong-headed. So don't engage in any kind of intellectual debate or anything like that. And this is a part of this, you know, this movement that is called anti-racism. It's cancel culture. It's things like that, not engaging with me. There's a lot of people, critical race theory professors that I reached out to and said, will you come on my podcast? I want to hear about what your thoughts are. And they don't want to engage. Maybe it's because I look like the enemy, because I'm kind of red because I went for a run, but I'm like a white, straight male. So maybe I look like people that have hurt them in the past, or that I look like the enemy. But they're judging me because I'm a white guy, or I look this way or think this way, that they don't want to engage with me. And that feels like it's similar to racism. So that's kind of my rant. But what are your thoughts on the anti-racist movement? I don't know how aware of it you are of critical race theory, but what are your thoughts on that kind of stuff? Because I want to know because you are the real deal. And I'm not saying they're not, but you clearly are someone who's trying to fight racism.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess there are different definitions of anti-racism, but, you know, people, I don't like to say, you know, either you are or you aren't. You know, if you're not anti-racist, then you're a racist. Not necessarily, but yes, sometimes by omission, you are enabling the other side or whatever, because you're not doing anything against it or to prevent it. I don't use the term anti-racist so much as I would say I'm a pro-humanist, you know, pro-humanity. A lot of the anti-racist people, you know, there are those who don't believe in racism, they don't support it, they actively work constructively to deconstruct it and to educate others so that others come to the conclusion, hey, you know, I've been heading down the wrong road. I need, you know, to change lanes here. And then there are those who believe in, you know, I'm going to destroy those racist people. I'm anti-racist. I'm going to get out there and kick someone's rear end, you know, who's a racist, and just, you know, wipe them off the map.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have those particular anti-racists as well. Just like you have racists who want to eliminate, you know, people who don't look like them, who don't believe as they believe. You know, these are the ones, you know, perhaps, you know, who join Nazi groups or Klan groups and things like that. And you have, you know, the other racists who, they're okay with you, they'll party with you and go hang out with you, but they don't want you marrying their daughter.
Right.
All right. So we have to be clear, when we say anti-racist, which group these people belong to. But those people who don't do anything, they say they're not racist, but they don't do anything, they don't take a stance. To me, that's omission, and that's enabling, the other side.
When you say take a stand, because this is important, thank you. Like, when you say take a stand, is it take a stand against like racism as far as the KKK and neo-Nazis, or is it take a stand like, support my policies? Like, I want, let's say, reparations. And we don't have to get into the whole reparations comment, but like, I think that's a complicated issue. At the very least, it's complicated about how it will be rolled out. And I'm down to have those conversations. I'm open to it, but
sure,
it's complicated. And if someone says like, no, I don't think we should just blatantly just roll out reparations or say I'm for it, or let's have a conversation about it, or I'm not sure. Or if someone says no, that's deemed a racist. Or like, I just like standing up against it. I think that there's a lot of it's got to be 99%, maybe not, because I'm in Los Angeles, so maybe I'm wrong. But I would think that a lot of people would say that I'm against racism, the KKK. You can't marry my daughter because you're black. You're bad because you're black. Those people, thank God, are less and less in 2020 than they were in 1920.
Yeah, but when you say I'm anti something, what does that mean that you're doing? Mm-hmm. Does it mean that, number one, are you taking action to do something, or are you just against it? Because, if you're just against it, that doesn't change anything. Right. But usually if you're pro something, you think in terms of action, proactive as opposed to reactive. So, I'm pro humanity. I'm going to stand up for humanity against, bigotry or prejudice or discrimination. I'm pro something. So I'm actively progressing, pro meaning moving in a forward direction, where anti could be, your position is, I don't support this, but I'm not actively engaging in anything. And then there are those who do actively engage in something. All right. So I'd rather be pro than anti, and have a position, that I will defend and promulgate.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that it's how you fight against it. Because my way of fighting against it is I've been having conversations with strangers on my social media, and mm-hmm. someone reaches out or disagrees with me, I say, hey, let's jump on and have a conversation. Because I kind of follow your lead, Daryl. Like, I look and I go, the way to shut down bad ideas is through discussion, common humanity, and highlighting through discussion the holes in those bad ideas. When you had the conversation with Robert Kelly, and he said, well, black people they do crime and they're this, and like you saying, well, I'm not. You just use logic to highlight holes. Like, that's my way of fighting it, but that's not the way that is advocated to fight it. It's not through conversation. It's through, whether civil disobedience. Like, isn't there more than one way to do it? Like, clearly.
Sure.
Right?
There are plenty of ways to do it. But, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Yes, while there are many different ways, we can address this, and some are more effective than others, let's consider the fact that it has been around. Well, the Civil War ended in 1865, officially. It's still going on for a lot of other people, right?
I have a question about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it didn't really end. It simply mutated. Owning people, ended, but it mutated then into, okay, so I can't own you, but I'm going to segregate myself from you.
Yeah.
All right. You can't drink from my water fountain. You can't sit in the front of my bus. You can't use my restroom. So we have segregation. That's just a simple mutation of slavery. Okay. So then, and you can't work in my place of business. So then that ended with integration and desegregation, but the whole thing did not really end. It simply mutated again into, okay, so now I got to hire you, and you can work here, but you're going to be the one cleaning the toilets and mopping the floors. You're not going to have a desk job. All right, so discrimination in the workplace. Then affirmative action comes in or whatever, and you have to give women and minorities, equal kind of jobs. Okay, so all right, so I'll give you a desk job, but I'm not going to promote you because you're a female or because you're black or because you're whatever. But people who don't look like you, who look like me, I'm going to promote them above you, even though you've been here longer than they have. You have seniority, but their look gets them promoted above you. So now you have what's called systemic or institutionalized racism. So each one of these things is just a mutation after slavery, as a means of controlling the other.
Yeah. I mean, I've been learning a lot and trying to express it through like my little lessons and stuff like that about systemic racism, about how those structures are disproportionately affecting communities of color because they are disproportionately in these communities that are kind of at the bottom of the socioeconomic hierarchy for a bunch of reasons going back to history. So if it affects, the bottom of this kind of hierarchy, that bottom is just disproportionately black. And it's more complicated than what it was in this, slavery or Jim Crow. It's more complicated, but that doesn't mean that it's yet living up to the creed of what America is supposed to be. Like, America is supposed to be equality of opportunity, and we don't have that. Look at the schools in one neighborhood compared to the other. They're clearly not there yet. And I want to do that work because I think that it's a huge misstep for our country not to tap into the unrealized potential and genius in a lot of these communities.
And that's exactly why Colin Kaepernick took a knee.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't disrespecting the flag. It was not disrespecting the veterans or military. He was pointing out the inaccuracies of what we say we stand for. You look at somebody like me, and I've said the Pledge of Allegiance a million times, since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But do I really believe it when I put my hand over my heart and I say one nation under God, indivisible? That right there is a lie. We are not one nation, and we are very divided. So we're not indivisible with liberty and justice for all. That's a crock of bullspit, because there is not liberty and justice for all in this country. It's what we want. And some people get it, but some people don't get it. So how am I supposed to feel if I'm saying that, time after time after time, and it's not true? And that's what he's pointing out. When, I'm not a big football fan, but I realize it's a major sport, and stadiums sell out, and and everybody comes and supports their home team or whatever. And so on the football field, you have black and white players working together in the team, and they get along fine. They work together against the black and white players in the opposing team. So whether it's the Washington Redskins playing the Green Bay Packers or whatever, both teams are black and white, and they all work together within their own team to defeat the other team. And everybody in the stands are cheering them, despite whether it's not a color thing. Then it's a team thing.
Yeah.
I may not want those black football players dating my daughter, but I'm going to cheer them, because they're my team. I want them to win for my hometown, right? And so we treat them all equally. Black guy scores a touchdown, you cheer him as much as you cheer a white guy who scores a touchdown or a basket or hits a home run with the baseball bat, whatever. But here's the thing. You love them on the field doing what they do because, you love that sport and you're cheering them on. But here's the difference. When the game is over and the white players and black players leave the stadium or the basketball court or whatever, they are treated differently beyond that property, especially when they're driving home. Mm-hmm. There are consequences for the black players who get pulled over that a lot of the white players don't see. And if they don't see it, one's perspective is one's reality. So when I say I got pulled over after I left the game, and they'll be like, well, what did you do? Well, I didn't do anything. I just got pulled over, man, and I got harassed. Well, you had to have done something for them to pull you over. No, I didn't. And see, you don't see that if it doesn't happen to you. So one's perspective is one's reality. And that's what the man was kneeling for. And then he gets called a son of a bitch by the top person in this country. Mm-hmm. And then when we see white police officers take a knee in the past couple of weeks during these protests, I don't hear anything about them being called sons of bitches. Right. So this is what we're seeing through our lens. And this is what we need to do. We need to connect those dots and say, hey, look, if we're going to be one nation indivisible under God with liberty and justice for all, then let's do it. Let's work together. And that is what is finally beginning to happen in this country, where you have the mass of white people taking part in these protests, coming together. That collective, that is what makes the United States. That is what is beginning to make this one nation indivisible, but it's not quite there yet. That's why I said, I think in the last episode, part 1, that we are turning a page. We're not at the end of the book. We're not quite at the end of the chapter, but at least the page is turning.
And I always I supported Colin Kaepernick. I support the argument that, well, the flag is the one thing we have to unite against, and it's dividing us. Look, you need to be able to protest bad ideas and bad motives, and you need to be able to protest the way that you see fit. It's a peaceful protest, and that's a real thing where people who are critiquing that say protest, but not that way. But then when the protests happen on the street, well, not that way. Well, no, the point of an assembly is you can do this, you can protest things, and you don't have to follow those rules, that it has to be your way. And I guess that's where I get to with a lot of this stuff is I might not want to go protest. Instead, I might want to sit here and have a conversation with a stranger and talk to them and get to know them. Can't there be many ways to get to this? I have the same goal. What you're saying is exactly what I want. It's why I'm working so hard. I'm up till 2 a.m. editing videos to put out on social media, because I want us to be divided. It does feel like a civil war. I mean, it feels like it's a civil war between, and I might be wrong on this, so I'm curious for your thoughts, but it feels like it's uniters versus dividers, or willing to talk versus not, or people who are following the Enlightenment principles versus people who just follow a strict ideology. It's the my way or the highway people, and they're on the left or the right, supporting the protests and being vehemently against the protests. But it's the ideological side versus the side that seems reasonable. I don't know if it's black or white. I know so many black people and Hispanic people and gay people who are, against some of the methods. I saw Terry Crews, who I think is just a really awesome guy, but he was on CNN with Don Lemon, and Don Lemon wouldn't let him talk and wouldn't let him hear his perspectives or give his perspectives. And I just was like, why does it have to be my way or the highway? Isn't that kind of what we're fighting against to some degree? And maybe I'm off, maybe I'm too into it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, that element of you need to fight racism this way. This is the right way to fight it. The way you're doing it is wrong. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, yes, and there is a lot of that. Yeah. And if you saw my documentary Accidental Courtesy, you would see that with the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, we're in the cafe.
Exactly. It's like I was doing it all wrong, and this is the only way I'm supposed to be doing things, and so forth and so on, which is a crock of bull to me. And you mentioned, they don't want you taking a knee, et cetera, et cetera. Well, here's the whole problem, because they don't want us protesting at all. That's what they're saying. They're saying the status quo, the establishment, they're fine with what's going on. Nobody's rioting, nobody's doing anything. Everybody's feeling comfortable. Well, no, when change needs to occur, if you demand it and you ask for it and you're not getting it, then you need to make people feel uncomfortable so that you get their attention. And they don't want you marching down the streets with a megaphone, criticizing policies of the president or the police department or whatever. So they want to shut you down there. They don't, if a store is being unfair to you. You know, they follow you around, or they don't serve you in the store, the restaurant. So then you go and have a sit-in. They don't want you doing that. You know, you're blocking the aisles or whatever. They don't want you, you know, walking around their building carrying billboards and whatever. So how, you know, let's say, you know, this is not the place or the time. So you ask, well, when is the time and where is the place? Yeah. Well, I don't know, but this is not it. So, you know, that's the answer, right? So now you got somebody like Colin Kaepernick, who is not marching around anybody's place of business, holding up a sign saying, unfair to whatever. He's not marching down the street with a megaphone shouting enough is enough, no justice, no peace, whatever the slogan is, you know, for that particular march. You know, he's not raising a ruckus. He's not out there, you know, burning down a building or whatever. He simply quietly kneeled down. Yeah. And still, you know, that was not acceptable. So in other words, what they're telling you is, we don't want you protesting. You know, you have all you're going to get, and we're satisfied with where you are, and we don't want you to be anything different than what you are. That's the message that the status quo is sending out.
Yeah, and I think that the status quo is clearly, I think, part of the reason why it's white people and black people and, you know, brown people and Asian, it doesn't matter, is because it's almost like Occupy Wall Street 2.0 and Black Lives Matter. It's a lot of people that are going, wait a second, we're being screwed over here. White people are being screwed over, black people are being screwed over. Like, this is not what we're talking, the power of corporations and the media we can't trust. Academia seems to be really just crap in the bed. Politicians, I mean, not to get too political, but like Joe Biden and Donald Trump, those are the best we got. That's the best we got. I might tend to disagree with that. And people are looking around going, this is not right. And that I get. And I think that's the thing that we can unite against. I agree. And I'm trying to fight against that. But still, like, when you get labeled a racist for having a disagreement, if you say all lives matter, which is the way that, and I've talked to a lot of like conservatives that say that, they're saying Black lives matter and Latino lives matter and white lives matter, all lives matter. People have lost their jobs because of saying all lives matter, because it's seen as an antagonizing dog whistle to racists to hate black people. And there might be some of that, but there also might not. And being labeled a racist, which I get called because I disagree with some of the way we get there, it's a horrible thing to be called. I guess I think, like, isn't the way we achieve that common humanity, the method we get there, just as important as getting it? Because if we get there through a series of shaming and ridicule and forcing and embarrassment and fear, then aren't we going to get that unity? And that's going to be anything founded on fear and shame and stuff. I guess do the ends justify the means is what I'm trying to work through in my head.
Okay, so
a lot there, but I'm just, yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about the movement, Black Lives Matter, which is totally, well, not totally, but somewhat disconnected from the phrase Black Lives Matter. Right?
So the phrase, and then there's the organization.
Well, it's not an organization, it's a movement. An organization is something that you belong to and you pay dues to and have meetings and stuff. So, you know, it's not an organization. The NAACP is an organization. The Red Cross, the Boy Scouts of America, those are organizations where, you know, you belong. You know, you're a member and you pay dues and you go to meetings and so forth and so on. And you have policies where they're created at the headquarters and they are disseminated to all the chapters of that organization spread out around the country. Black Lives Matter is not centralized. There is no central Black Lives Matter. They did not trademark the name. You can walk out in the street right now and start a Black Lives Matter movement if you wanted to. Right. I could do it, okay? Because they don't have any ownership of the trademark. The founders did not want to do that. They did not want to centralize. They wanted just to be organic. But I think at the time they had no clue how big it was going to blow up. Yeah. And here's the problem with Black Lives Matter in that regard. The idea behind the movement was a fantastic idea. I mean, personally, I would have trademarked it, okay, myself. I would have centralized it because there's always strength in numbers when you're cohesive, right? But the idea behind the founding of it was to put the national spotlight on the plight of Black men who, for lack of a better word, were being murdered by white police officers for holding their cell phone or holding their wallet. So Black men got to go to their grave, whereby white men in the same predicament or same situation either got to go home or go to jail. Some got to go to jail via Burger King, like Dylan Roof, for example, right?
Shooting up a Black church, right?
Yeah, for shooting up a Black, he was a mass murderer.
Yeah.
And he said he was hungry when he was arrested. And the police took him to Burger King and bought him a hamburger and then took him to jail and fingerprinted and processed him and photographed him. All right. Now he just committed a capital crime, one of the most heinous crimes of the century. He walked into a church, into a Bible study, and in cold blood murdered 9 people who were there conducting Bible study. He didn't even know them. But yet George Floyd and Eric Garner up in Staten Island, Eric Garner was what? He was charged with selling loose cigarettes.
Yeah.
Okay. And which is I'm not saying he wasn't breaking the law. He's breaking the law, sure. Give him a ticket or arrest him. But he was not a violent criminal. He didn't commit anybody's murder. He was committing a non-violent crime, and they pounced on him, banged him to the ground, and then choked him to death on camera. And he was the original "I can't breathe" person, right? George Floyd was allegedly passing a counterfeit $20 bill. We will never know. Did he know it was a counterfeit $20 bill? The clerk knew that because the clerk is trained to recognize counterfeit money. So the clerk did the right thing. If he suspected this to be counterfeit, he called the authorities. All right, but we don't know if George Floyd actually knew he had a fake 20 on him. That would have been determined where? In court. All right, because it could have been he had a $100 bill yesterday, and he bought something and made change, and whoever he made the change from gave him a bunch of 20s, and one of those things was fake. Maybe he didn't know it was in his pocket. Maybe he did know it was in his pocket. Either way, we will never find out for sure. All right, because the man can't testify. Did he have more fake $20 bills on them? Did they go through his pockets and go through his wallet? They did. And so, because they took everything off his body to do the autopsy or whatever. Did he have other fake $20 bills in there? We don't know. Okay, court would have determined that.
Yeah.
But he never had his day in court because he was murdered. And again, I don't care if he passed a fake $1 bill or a fake $100 bill. That was a non-violent crime. He should have been arrested or ticketed or whatever. And instead he was murdered. So, that further proves the point of Black Lives Matter. Unfortunately, as I said, they did not centralize, they did not trademark their name. So now you got all kinds of chapters all around the country, and they all are on different pages.
Some are great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've had ones criticize me for the work I do. I've also had some in Detroit and some in New York call me and say, hey, we like what you're doing. Do you give workshops? Can you train us to do what you do? Yeah. So they're all over the map, But when the media reports something, especially if there's something negative that some Black Lives Matter chapter has done, they don't say the Cincinnati chapter of Black Lives Matter or the Detroit chapter. They just say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So now it just paints a broad brush over the whole movement, where each group has its own little leader, and they're not on the same page. It's like having too many chefs in the kitchen. If you had a centralized unit with one president, and everybody has the same, exactly, and everybody is disseminated the same policy. So the chapters all across the country are on the same page, just like the Boy Scouts in Los Angeles behave the same way as the Boy Scouts in Ithaca, New York, and the Boy Scouts in Miami, Florida, or the Red Cross or the NAACP. You have, uniformity. That is a lot stronger than division everywhere else, and nobody knows, what this chapter stands for versus that chapter, what they stand for.
Yeah, I have been following this really closely because I think it's really important. I have not heard it expressed like that, and that's, of course, Daryl, you're on. Like that's a brilliant way to put it, because what happens is like when there's, I've seen the videos of, you know, some Black Lives Matter people wearing Black Lives Matter shirts and stuff, beating the crap out of someone, a white guy, and then other Black Lives Matter people get in there. They're like, "Whoa, what are you doing? Stop this!"
Exactly.
And it's so people are confused by what Black Lives Matter is, and that's a really good point. I also want to just say, because when you bring up George Floyd and Eric Garner, which are horrific instances, I want to just put it out to my audience to hold back on the whataboutisms, because there was Tony Timpa, Daniel Shavers, you know, Jeremy Martis. White people are abused by police too, and that's like the, when people say, you know, Black Lives Matter, you're talking about the 9 unarmed people that got killed by cops. What about the black on black crime in Chicago? It's like, yes, we have a lot of issues, but can't we focus on one issue now? Yes, the bigger issue is the way policing is done is not good. It needs to be fixed. Absolutely. And if George Floyd, because it has the racial element as well, if that gets the work done that we need to do for our police department, then good. But as soon as you say, well, that happens to white people too, then you're not focusing your attention where it needs to go. And that's not going to help. If I get discriminated against because someone says, I don't like you, you're a white male, I'm not going to hire you. Okay. Like for me I think that would be wrong. And for someone to say like, well, that happens to everybody, blah, blah, blah. It's like, can't we just focus on that I was wronged here? And there's enough of a pattern that we can like focus on this stuff. So I just want to shy people away. And I do this too sometimes, where I'm like, well, that just happens. Look at the stats and this. It's like, that's not going to help us solve problems. And we need to go about this. Like, these are problems that need to be solved. So I just wanted to address that.
And you know, you mentioned a minute ago, you know, all lives matter and white lives matter, black lives. You know, so let's talk about that for a second. That's why I was separating the phrase from the movement. Like for example, I personally am not a member of the movement, but I do believe that black lives do matter because I'm one of them, right? So my life does matter.
I care and I'm not. So
So, but now, people say, you know, well, you know, when someone says Black Lives Matter, well, what about white lives? Well, white lives are not in danger, in as much danger right now as Black lives when it comes to police. Sure, white people die at the hands of police, but not on the frequency that that Black people do. We've seen that. We've proven that. You know, show me your videos of cops kneeling on the neck of a white person and choking him to death. Show me a white guy selling loose cigarettes, and they do, or selling drugs and get on the street corner and being choked to death. Show me a white guy holding his cell phone or his wallet and being shot 40 times because the cops thought it was a gun. We don't see those things.
They do happen. Right? That's the Tony.
They do happen.
Yeah.
But not at the frequency. Okay. Not at that frequency. All right. So that's the point. Now, so yes, all lives matter. But it's the Black lives that give the appearance of mattering less. All right, that's what the phrase means. All right. Now, so when someone says, well, you know, Black Lives Matter is racist because you know it doesn't include all lives. It should be all lives matter. Okay, so fine. So you're okay with saying you're upset because the phrase Black Lives Matter does not include white lives. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so are you cool with Blue Lives Matter? Well, yeah. Well, wait a minute. Blue Lives Matter doesn't say anything about white lives. Oh, but you're cool with that, but you're not cool with Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Right. So that just tells the person right then and there, you know, there's a race issue. You're not cool with black, but you're cool with blue. And Blue Lives Matter says nothing about white people any more so than Black Lives Matter does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, you got to think about that for a second as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, like Roland Fryer did that study on like police brutality and stuff like that. And, you know, Black people are overwhelmingly more like, or noticeably more like harassed and beaten and stuff like that. And his work, you know, showed that it wasn't like, as far as being shot, that it wasn't, but like, I think that we have to, and I've talked about this throughout my podcast, is people grab onto stats and data and say, this is what truth is, as opposed to the truth is that a man was killed with a cop's knee on his neck. And yes, it happened to Tony Timpa in a very similar way, but this happened to George Floyd. Let's focus on this. Like, we need a story to get us to move. And the power of story is so important. You as a musician know this, that a song can just change everything. I mean, people, Reuben Carter was released from prison because Bob Dylan wrote a song about it. The power of story to get the results. No one, for whatever reason, cared about Tony Timpa. And it's unfortunate. I'm sorry, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but it didn't grab the attention the way that George Floyd did. And we need to find a way to fix what's happening, because also perception is reality. Is even if the data would show that white people are killed at a higher rate or whatever, an equal rate, it still is not the reality that you feel. White people do not feel it. And your perception is reality. That I have Black friends and their experience is just different. When I'm out with them, their experience is just different. Whether it's at a bar, in a restaurant, or with a cop, or with security, it's a different experience. And we just need to recognize that. And that's not always quantifiable.
Okay, so two things. One, let's talk about Tony Timpa for a second, okay. and the other white people that have been egregiously murdered at the hands of police. I think so, that for no reason.
Yeah.
All right. So where were the marches for them? How come white people didn't get together and say, hey, we got to stop this. Get out there and march and say, we got to stop police brutality. All right. Or whatever it was. So they only bring it up when Black people bring up, what's been going on. So if you were really that concerned about Tony Timpa and the other ones, as you should be, all right, why not go and join those Black people who are marching for their people, all right, and say, hey, we get it. Ours were done the same way. So we're going to march for George Floyd with you, and we'd like to invite you to march with us for Tony Timpa, and that way we have that collective, all right. We work together. We help each other out. That is the way you solve problems, with that collective voice. But you do not defend your own transgressions by pointing out somebody else's.
Yeah.
You have to have your own thing. And then another thing you mentioned, Black on Black crime. All right, there is no such thing as Black on Black crime. What that is a crime of opportunity. All right, why do we see Black perpetrators and Black victims so much? Well, because that's who's close by. That is that's who is within proximity. Okay, so as a Black person, let's just say if I was the criminal, the perpetrator, and I need money for drugs, and I'm in a Black neighborhood, that's who I'm going to go rob. I don't have time to go all the way across town to the white neighborhood and rob some white guy and then come all the way back and buy my drugs. All right. So it's a crime of proximity, because if you go to some white area, like say Bangor, Maine, or Sandpoint, Idaho, Hayden Lake, Idaho, and the crime out there, guess what it is? It's white people, white victims and white criminals. But where do you hear the term white on white crime? You don't hear that term.
White neighborhoods, yeah.
Okay. Timothy McVeigh, who bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Building, the Alfred P. Murrah building, right? He killed 168 people. The majority of those 168 people were white people. And Timothy McVeigh was a white person. Was that called white on white crime? Ted Bundy killed a bunch of white women. Was that white on white crime? Charles Manson killed a bunch of white people. Sharon Tate and all those other people out there in California. Was that white on white crime? But we don't hear that. It was a crime of proximity. All right. And you go to a trailer park, that's a white trailer park, and somebody gets murdered there. It's a crime of proximity.
Yeah.
It's not white on white crime.
Yeah. That's a great point, because I think that one of the things also, and this highlights the idea of systemic racism, is if a white person goes into the hood to buy drugs or something and they get killed, there's a big investigation. It's in the news. Everyone raises the arms up and stuff like that. But one young Black man kills another young Black man. It doesn't. And
Right.
when I taught in East LA, I mentioned this before because it's so upsetting, is I teach at a nice private school now in a nice neighborhood. And someone who went to the rival school, a young girl, teenage girl, was killed in a car accident. And it was terribly sad. And it was on the news and the newspaper. When I taught in East LA, in 1 year, I lost like 6 students or something like that. And there was one story that was just really, really sad. He was a Hispanic kid who was paralyzed half his body, and he took too long to take off his jacket when they were like, running like his stuff, like trying to rob him, and he got shot and killed. It didn't even make the paper. They never found the guy. There was no investigation really. Like there's an element of this too, where it feels like the police departments, and maybe this is unfair, it might be, but it feels like the police departments are less interested, the media is less interested in covering when a young black man kills another young black man. So there's almost like it's okay, or it's like it's just part of life in the hood. Like it's not, there aren't up in arms. But and then the other side, the Tony Timpa one, you brought up a great point that I never thought about, is we knew Tony Timpa died in 2016 in a horrible way. Why didn't we march for him? We really should have. And because we didn't, George Floyd died. Like, we could have stopped this at some point if white people really looked out for their fellow human and said, this is wrong, and we should have marched for Tony Timpa, but we didn't, and these behaviors continued. Those are just things that I think about that you brought up that I think are really important parts.
Now, okay, so now you have a group of white people who go out in the woods and practice survivalist tactics and all this kind of stuff, and they're paramilitary and they're anti-government. What do you call those groups?
Cults, maybe, or something like that?
No.
No, militia?
Exactly, militia. Yeah. Okay, militias, all right? Now,
bullshit, yeah.
There are black people who do the same thing, okay? And they go out in the woods and practice their survival tactics and this, that, and the other. What are they called?
Would it be like a hate group or something like that? I don't know.
They're called militants.
Militant. Yeah, militant.
Now, the term militant has more of a negative connotation than militia.
Yeah.
Yet they're doing the same thing. They're paramilitary, anti-government, practicing survival techniques with their weapons out in the woods. But white people are called, patriots, militias, but the black people doing it, oh, no, those are dangerous people. They're trying to take over the country. They're militant.
You see those photos of like the white guys who are protesting like coronavirus shutdowns, and they have their ARs,
right,
standing up proud, and everyone's just like, oh, patriot, we're safe with them. But then you see black guys do it, or the Black Panthers did it, and that's how we got gun laws, is like, black guys with ARs, that's scarier.
Right, it's provoking. It's provoking.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because how do you not see them as the same? If you don't see them as the same, then there's something going on here.
Well, interestingly enough, when the ones you're talking about, the white people with the AK-47s and stuff and the other weapons they had, they went to the governor's mansion, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, right? Yeah. Because they're all bent out of shape because she wouldn't open up the city or something. They wanted to keep it on lockdown. Yeah. And the president told her that she needed to what? Negotiate with them. They're standing there at her mansion with guns, and he wants her to negotiate with them. Well, then when black and white unarmed protesters came to the White House, he ran and hid in his bunker. He didn't come out and negotiate, and they were unarmed. And from his bunker, he's tweeting that the governors are all weak and they need to be strong and dominate. Yet he's hiding in his bunker. Yeah. And so when that made the news and people started calling him on Twitter and on social media, bunker baby and bunker boy, that's when he got upset and called out the military to disperse the crowd with rubber bullets and tear gas so he could walk across the park and do his photo op with the Bible in front of the church.
Yeah. So where do we go from here, Daryl? Where do you see?
Well, I see people realizing the value of working together. As I pointed out the last time, it's that collective voice of those different colors marching on the streets together that are making that page turn a lot faster and making things happen. And we're seeing that ripple effect that we've never seen before, where these protests were, for the last few weeks or whatever, have been geared primarily towards the police. But the ripple effect that we've had is this. Statues are coming down. Confederate flags are being banned from NASCAR, which is ground zero for that kind of thing. The Mississippi flag is changing after all these years of resistance. Racist depictions on food labels are changing their branding from Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. We're seeing all kinds of stuff beginning to happen. And that is a ripple effect, but that is only brought by that collective voice of people working with each other, that mass of white people joining in with the Black people for the common cause. That is what is making it more effective than it's ever been before. And that's what needs to be done for Tony Timpa and all the other people, is the idea of working together. Stop letting the powers that be divide us. All right. Yes. That's what Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for. He does not want to be one nation. He wants to be one nation indivisible. He wants to put his hand over his heart and feel the same thing you feel when you put your hand over your heart. But he's not feeling it. No Black person is feeling it, because we are divided. We're not indivisible, and there is not liberty and justice for all.
So yeah, the two kind of ideas that I keep pushing real hard is like unity. Let's talk to one another, open up dialogue, open up conversation, show each other grace, but look at each other like, fellow human, and even more specifically, fellow American. And then the other thing is, I think drawing lines of, when you talk about like statues coming down, like
you froze for about 15 seconds. All I heard was the two ideas, and then you dropped out.
I'm sorry. Yeah, one was just uniting, that look at each other like your brother or sister, your fellow American, but also just your fellow human. I think that's really important. Less judgment, less stuff like that. And then also drawing lines, like when you mentioned the statues coming down, I see a huge difference between removing a Robert E. Lee or a Confederate, which I see as treason, and a Thomas Jefferson, Frederick Douglass, something like that coming down. And I think that's like, I think it's just going to be messy. Like, these things are not, the civil rights movement in the 60s was not clean. Like, the way it's being told is just like, Martin Luther King came out, he said, let's hold hands, and it was all good. And it's like, this is a messy thing, because those in power don't want to really, give up anything. We have our blind spots. This is going to get messy, but I think that individuals need to draw lines for themselves and what they believe to be right, of like, okay, if protesting starts acting this way, then I will stand up and say, well, that's not going to be, positive. And just so people have like some sort of line, so it doesn't become anarchy, because we don't.
Okay, but let's talk about the flag and statues for a second. Okay. Number one, the Confederate statues need to be removed from public government property. So does the Confederate flag. And I'll tell you why. Now I'm not saying they should be destroyed. All right, they should be removed tactfully, put in a museum, or build a Confederate memorial park, stick them there, whatever. But they do not belong in public. We are the United States of America, not the Confederate States of America, which they were hoping. That's what the Civil War was fought about, the CSA, right? Okay, we are the USA. Now, number one, we went to war against Great Britain. The majority of white Americans in this country are of British descent, because they came here. Why? They were escaping the tyranny of the king over there, and they came here to the New World. We went to war against their former country, Great Britain, and we beat them, which is why we celebrated last weekend, right? Independence Day, 4th of July. That's what that was all about, the Revolutionary War. So the British Americans, or Americans of British descent, they had ancestors who fought in that war against the United States. But to honor their ancestors, Do they build statues out here of King George III and fly the Union Jack? No. Okay, the loser does not get to build his statues or fly his flag. We went to war against Japan when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. There are plenty of Japanese Americans in this country who had ancestors who participated in that war. All right, I'm sure they love their ancestors and so forth and so on, but they don't build statues out here of Hirohito and fly the Japanese flag, right? Because the loser does not get to build his statues or fly his flag. We went to war against Germany, and there are tons of German Americans here, and we know German Americans have ancestors from Germany back in the day who had to be under the Third Reich because Germany was a dictatorship. And either they supported that dictator or they were exterminated unless they escaped the country. So we beat Germany. Do these German Americans who've been here, do they build statues of Adolf Hitler and fly swastikas? No, not unless they're neo-Nazis or something, right? So the loser does not get to do that. The Confederacy lost the war. They need to get over it. They don't get to build their Robert E. Lees and fly their battle flag. And that was the battle flag. The Civil War was fought over slavery. And the South has, when people say, no, it's not hate, it's heritage, blah, blah, blah. Yes, the South has a lot to be proud of. They have some great aspects of heritage to the South. Slavery was not one of them. Well, no, it wasn't, so much fought over slavery, Mr. Davis. It was fought over states' rights. Yeah, states' rights for what? The state's right to own slaves. Right. Okay, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Let's face it. All right. The loser lost. I don't care if your great-great-grandfather was in the Confederacy. He's a loser. Okay, he's a loser. Get over it. Your granddaddy was a loser. All right, done. But hey, listen. I have ancestors who fought in the Confederacy. Okay, because I'm a descendant of slaves. My parents were from Virginia, and slaves had to fight for their slave masters. So I had ancestors who fought in the Confederacy. Now, while I believe in honoring my ancestors, because without them I wouldn't be here, right? But I don't have to honor the Confederacy. I don't have to honor slavery. And when you fly that particular flag, because that was not actually the flag of the Confederate States. That was the battle flag, the one that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that battle was fought for slavery, for the state's rights to own slaves. Yeah. So, when you start talking about heritage and all that stuff, you Google a KKK rally, and click on images. You'll see all these people in robes and hoods walking around with Confederate flags. Yeah. Okay. The Klan is associated with hate. Whatever they want to say, that's fine. Not every Klansman is a hater, perhaps, but they have a history of hate, and that is proven. That is a fact. You bomb somebody's church, you drag somebody behind a pickup truck, you hang them from a tree. That is hate. And you walk around there with Confederate flags, that are in your group. That represents hate. That represents support for slavery and the disenfranchisement of a certain group of people. So now, if you say that you're not hate and this is heritage, then I tell you what, you go to a Klan rally with me, and when you see those people pull out their Confederate flags, you tell them, no, that is not what it stands for. Give you back your flag. And if you do that, I will come to your home and I will take your Confederate flag and I will hoist it up your flagpole for you. If you really believe this heritage and you're willing to go and confront them and tell them to give you back your flag. I've had no takers so far.
Yeah. Daryl, thank you. I think that that's why you're so valuable to this conversation right now. We are being so divided, and you just have a different perspective. You just have perspective that almost no one else on the planet has. And that's why it's so valuable for you to have your voice out there. And that's why I love bringing you on here, and maybe we'll do another one. Because I learned a lot on this podcast. And I think I went into it like I do with a lot of things, like, all right, I kind of have this figured out. You brought up some just great points that highlighted my blind spots and things. And I think that's one of the things that you do, Daryl. I value you a lot in helping me to understand this, so I can go out then with using my social media and using my voice to try and get us through this. So
but Will, you're a value to me too, because I have to hear you so I know what people are thinking, what they're feeling, who don't live in my world, and then I can figure out how it can best be addressed for both of us. So, very simply put, a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution.
That's the way to end it. Sir, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, man. Take care, stay in touch, and good luck. Bye-bye.